At 6, the Prime Minister admits attending a Downing Street party at the height of lockdown and apologises. Boris Johnson told MPs he was at the staff drinks in the Downing Street garden for about 25 minutes in May 2020.
I regret the way the event I have described was handled. I bitterly regret it and wish that we could have done things differently. And I have and will continue to apologise for what we did.
The party's over, Prime Minister. The only question is, will the British public kick him out? Will his party kick him out? Or will he do the decent thing and resign?
Yeah! The Prime Minister urged MPs to wait for the full results of an official inquiry, facing mocking for claiming it was a work event and calls to quit even from his own side.
The other main story tonight, Prince Andrew faces a civil trial in the United States over accusations of sexual assault after a judge refuses to dismiss it. Virginia Giuffre is suing the Duke of York, claiming he abused her when she was 17, allegations he strenuously denies. We'll be asking what it means now for the Queen's second son. And soaring energy costs could affect household bills for the next 2 years, warns the boss of the UK's biggest energy supplier.
And in the sports, on the BBC News channel, Novak Djokovic admits to a serious COVID breach before he arrived in Melbourne. But with 5 days to go to the Australian Open, he's still in the draw.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. The Prime Minister has for the first time admitted that he attended a party in Downing Street at the height of the first lockdown. Appearing in front of a packed House of Commons, Boris Johnson apologised, saying he knew the rage people felt with him and the government. He said he was at the drinks in the Downing Street garden in May 2020 for about 25 minutes to thank staff, but insisted that he believed it was technically within the rules. At the time, it was forbidden to meet more than one person outside your household for social reasons. Boris Johnson is facing intense pressure from all sides. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, called on him to resign, saying he was a man without shame. The leader of the Scottish Conservatives, Douglas Ross, has also called for his resignation, saying his position is no longer tenable. Our political editor, Laura Kuensberg, has the latest.
A mess. There is no other word. The Prime Minister belatedly trying to clean up, with an admission of possible rule breaking, an apology from a weakened leader. But will the answers to today's Prime Minister's questions see Boris Johnson through?
Mr. Speaker, I want to apologise. I know that millions of people across this country have made extraordinary sacrifices over the last 18 months, and I know the rage they feel with me and with the government I lead when they think that in Downing Street itself the rules are not being properly followed by the people who make the rules. There were things we simply did not get right, and I must take responsibility.
Claiming to disbelief in the Commons that technically a bring-your-own-booze organised drinks event was within the lockdown rules.
Even if it could be said technically to fall within the guidance, there would be millions and millions of people who simply would not see it that way.
Well, there we have it. After months of deceit and deception, the pathetic spectacle of a man who's run out of road. His defence that he didn't realise he was at a party. It is so ridiculous that it's actually offensive to the British public.
Labour able to mock the unusually subdued Tory showman.
When the whole country was locked down, he was hosting boozy parties in Downing Street. Yes. Is he now going to do the decent thing and resign?
I regret very much that we did not do things differently that evening.
The Prime Minister pretended that he had been assured there were no parties. Yeah. Now it turns out he was at the parties all along. Yeah. Can't the Prime Minister see why the British public think he's lying through his teeth?
Mr. Speaker, it's up to the right honourable gentleman to choose how he conducts himself in this place.
There was derision, laughter at the Prime Minister's defence. 6 questions later, election winner Boris Johnson looked defeated.
Happy New Year. Not a very happy New Year, however.
This is not just a Westminster drama.
It's exactly midday. We're heading over to Westminster, where Prime Minister Boris Johnson...
It was the must-watch from the morning sofa. The country seeing repeated calls for Boris Johnson to quit.
Will the Prime Minister, for the good of the country, accept that the party is over and decide to resign?
Do the decent thing and resign.
Do the honourable thing and resign. He must resign.
And the concern on his own side is potent. The number of MPs saying it's over for Mr Johnson growing in the shadows, and calls for him to quit out in the open now.
I explained yesterday.
Even from the MP who is also the leader of the Conservatives in Scotland.
I explained to the Prime Minister today that I felt he should stand down because of this, but that is ultimately his decision.
But does the Conservative Party, let alone the country, really have the appetite for more political turmoil?
Say again? I've just sent a text to the PM, which was hilarious.
There was a sprinkling of supportive messages, not just texts from Mr Johnson himself.
What is needed above all is a doubling down, a determination to rebuild trust between the government that the Prime Minister leads and the British people.
Boris Johnson's admission and apology in there has bought him a little time. A pause until the report into what did or didn't happen in Number 10 is complete. Yet for many on his own side, he's already lost the benefit of the doubt. Growing numbers of his own MPs want him out, discussing frantically how and when his exit could happen. It is not inevitable, though, that he'll be hastened out of office. But it's no longer impossible to imagine that the Prime Minister might be gone before too long.
Look at this, it's a fantastic garden you got here. Look at that. This is a...
It is indeed a beautiful garden.
This was a former bomb crater.
A place the Prime Minister was happy to show off in days gone by. Do you see yourself being here for the very long term?
Well, we're working very hard, Laura.
But his time in residence could be brought to an early close by what happened literally in his own backyard. Laura Kunzberg, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, the inquiry into a series of alleged parties held during lockdown in Number 10 and Whitehall is still ongoing. It's not known when the senior civil servant, Sue Gray, will release her findings. Our deputy political editor, Vicky Young, considers the political fallout of the last few months.
It's been a disastrous few months for the Prime Minister, and he stood here today accused of deception, of treating the British people with contempt. Some on his own side think this could be a tipping point that leads to his downfall. But this is a man who's recovered from setbacks before, and Cabinet colleagues are rallying round.
I think it's right, as he was saying today in the House of Commons, that Sue Gray is given the time to conduct that investigation. There'll be a full counting of them. The Prime Minister will come back to the House of Commons. That's the right way to handle this.
There's a long list of allegations that COVID rules were broken in Downing Street, starting during the first lockdown in 2020. A photo taken on May the 15th showed the Prime Minister, his wife and staff in the Downing Street garden with bottles of wine and cheese. When asked about it, Boris Johnson said those people were at work, talking about work. A few days later, about 100 people were invited by email to socially distanced drinks in the Number 10 garden. Today, the Prime Minister admitted he attended for around 25 minutes. And on the 15th of December, multiple sources told the BBC there was a Christmas quiz for Number 10 staff. Boris Johnson took part remotely, but others gathered in one room. A video obtained by ITV News showed the Prime Minister's then Press Secretary Allegra Stratton joking about reports of an event on the 18th of December, saying this fictional party was a business meeting and it was not socially distanced. Those that worked with Theresa May in Downing Street say clawing back support can be difficult.
The issues that this government is suffering from at the moment are all self-inflicted wounds and are about the way in which the Prime Minister is running his government. It's not clear to me that he is ever going to be able to fully recover his reputation from what's happened. But the starting point, I think, has to be to get all of the facts out there, to be completely honest about what has happened.
Conservative MPs wanted Boris Johnson as their leader because they thought he could win them elections. Brexit and his unique campaigning style made him a vote winner. But governing brings different challenges. The endless scrutiny, having to watch every word you say, and some fear that it's his flawed judgment that's now being exposed. And on that, his former closest advisor, Dominic Cummings, has become his harshest critic, accusing him of not being up to the job. For months, there were questions about how Mr Johnson paid for a lavish refurbishment of his Downing Street flat. His standards advisor said he'd acted unwisely. And then, when former Minister Owen Paterson was involved in a row over sleaze, he tried to change the rules to protect him, backtracked, and the Lib Dems then won the safe Tory seat. Boris Johnson's authority has been severely dented, and all this a huge distraction from the policies he promised to deliver. Vicky Young, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, let's talk to our political editor, Laura Kuenssberg, now in Westminster. Can the Prime Minister ride this out?
Well, Sophie, it's a very, very, very bad situation for Boris Johnson tonight. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. And he's got two big, nasty problems. First off, by his own admission, he said millions of members of the public, maybe many of our viewers watching tonight, will feel full of rage finding out exactly what has happened. And as one minister suggested to me today, that what seemed to some people as a partial apology, saying, well, I thought it was fine, I thought it was technically within the rules, that to some people's ears might actually have made all of this worse. The second problem is one at home, inside his own party. Yes, there are still MPs who want him to be able to work this out. There are still MPs who believe that it can be sorted and that Boris Johnson can get out of what is a very, very significant scrape, and forgive the very noisy motorbike going past. But I have to say, it feels today and in the last 24 hours that there's been a real poison starting to spread through the Conservative Party and the attitude towards Boris Johnson. Politics can change extremely quickly, so it's far too early to say that this is terminal. But Sophie, it is the case that there are more Conservatives by the hour coming to the conclusion that Boris Johnson, who was that great election victor for them, is fast becoming more of a liability.
Our political editor, Laura Kuenssberg in Westminster, thank you. The other main story tonight, and Prince Andrew has failed to get a civil case dismissed in the United States which accuses him of sexually assaulting a teenage girl. Virginia Giuffre is suing the Duke of York, claiming that he abused her when she was 17 at the homes of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. The Prince has strenuously denied the allegations, but the ruling by the judge in New York today means the civil trial can now go ahead. Our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell reports.
Everything for Andrew had rested on this ruling, and it has gone against him. In his 43-page ruling in the case of Virginia Giuffre, plaintiff, and Prince Andrew, Duke of York, defendant, the judge's conclusion was very straightforward. The defendant's motion to dismiss the complaint is denied in all respects, the judge wrote. The possibility of appealing at this stage appears to be remote, so these are Andrew's basic options. He can settle out of court, there'd be no admission of liability, but he would pay a perhaps substantial sum to Virginia Giuffre. He can default, that is, ignore the court case, and by default there would be a finding against him. Finally, he could fight it out in court. He'd have to give a deposition under oath, the rival stories would be tested, the matter would be decided in open court. Lawyers who've been following the case say none of the options will be attractive to him.
Andrew's got no good options now. He can't make things better. So essentially, I think he's either going to have to engage in the trial process or he's going to have to settle, and that may well be his least worst option.
But it would be up to Virginia Giuffre to decide whether to accept any out-of-court settlement. At the moment, she doesn't seem inclined to do so. In a statement, her lawyer said, Virginia Giuffre is of course pleased that Prince Andrew's motion to dismiss has been denied and that evidence will now be taken concerning her claims against him. She looks forward to a judicial determination of the merits of these claims. All of which leaves Andrew facing the prospect of a bruising court case and the Queen, in this her Platinum Jubilee year, of enduring months of upset. In his Newsnight interview, the one in which he said he couldn't remember meeting the then 17-year-old Virginia Giuffre, Andrew was asked whether he felt his behaviour had damaged the Queen and the royal family.
I don't believe it's been damaging to the Queen at all. Has to me. If I was in a position to be able to answer all these questions in a way that gave sensible answers other than the ones that I've given that gave closure, then I'd love it. But I'm afraid I can't, because I'm just as much in the dark as many people.
If Andrew does fight on, he'll have to answer all the other side's questions under oath. And he will be able to declare his innocence, and his lawyers will be able to test Virginia Giuffre's allegations. But at what price to the reputation of the royal family? As lawyers are saying, he has no good options. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
Let's join our North America correspondent Neda Tawfik now, who is in New York for us. And in legal terms, what happens next?
Well, essentially, this case moves forward. There is a long shot that his team could appeal, but that would require the judge's permission. And that is not looking promising at all, given this 46-page decision. Now, even if an appeal attempt is made, the discovery process will move forward as scheduled, with deadlines this summer. And that is the stage where each side has to disclose a wealth of information and documents. We already know from Virginia Giuffre's lawyers that they have demanded Prince Andrew's medical records after he alleged that her claims are false because he's unable to sweat, claims he made in a jaw-dropping Newsnight interview. And it's worth noting that if he does fight this case, he will face questioning from Ms. Giuffre's lawyer, David Boys, and he's considered one of the greatest trial lawyers in America. So while Prince Andrew has always denied the allegations, he now has some crucial legal decisions to make.
Neda Tawfik in New York, and Nick Witchell is with me now. No good options, as you said in your report.
Yeah, I think this is an absolutely monumental mess for Andrew, and it's undoubtedly damaging for the royal family. I think the weight of opinion amongst lawyers would be that he will have to now seek an out-of-court settlement. But of course, an out-of-court settlement requires both sides to agree, both sides to acquiesce. And there are certainly, I think, suggestions that at the moment, whether it's for tactical reasons or not, that Virginia Giuffre wants her day in court. And all of this, 3 days now after Buckingham Palace confirmed the programme for the Platinum Jubilee. Can we really suppose that we can have a Platinum Jubilee with the Queen happily taking part in it, whilst charges of this serious nature, civil charges, are laid against her second son, and he's defending them in the autumn? Can we suppose that he's going to take part in the Jubilee trooping the colour, riding as he's entitled to do as Colonel of the Grenadier Guards? Well, they don't want him. We mark his repeated protestations of his innocence. But I do think that many people will now feel that it is time for him to withdraw gracefully and completely now.
Nicholas Witchell, thank you. The time is coming up to 6:20. Our top story this evening. The Prime Minister admits attending a garden party in Downing Street at the height of lockdown in May 2020 and apologises. And coming up, we'll hear what voters in the West Midlands make of today's developments.
And in the sports on the BBC News channel, there were farcical and embarrassing scenes at the Africa Cup of Nations as the referee blows for full time too early in the match between Mali and Tunisia.
The boss of the company which owns British Gas has warned that soaring energy costs could affect household bills for the next 2 years. Bills are expected to rise to up to £2,000 per household from April, when a new energy price cap takes effect. The chief executive of Centrica, Chris O'Shea, says there's no suggestion that prices will come down anytime soon. Our business editor, Simon Jack, has been speaking to him.
Millions of households may see any disposable income go up in flames this spring as average energy bills rise by an estimated 50%. Households like Sean's in the Forest of Dean.
And we're not talking 5, 10, 15 quid here. This is catastrophic, really, for me, because I will have no more money in my personal income to do anything. This wipes out my spare money. We'll have nothing left.
This is no short-term price shock, according to the UK's biggest energy supplier, who says an international scramble for gas means higher prices are here to stay.
I can't say that this will be done in 6 months or 9 months, in a year. I can simply look at what the market says at the moment, and the market suggests that high gas prices will be here for the next 18 months to 2 years.
He says customers are rightly concerned and something must be done to protect them.
When I talk to our customers and I hear how distressed they are at the increase in prices that are coming, then I think it's inconceivable that we don't do something to help those people.
And when he says we, he, like other providers, is looking mainly at the government. Options for the Treasury include scrapping VAT of 5% on energy bills. That would be worth about £100 a year. Quick, easy but blunt, better off households would benefit too. More targeted, reform the Warm Homes discount, a one-off payment of £140 available to a limited number of people on certain benefits. Make that more generous and widen the eligibility. Then there are green charges on our bills of £170 a year. You could scrap those or move them into general taxation. Maybe fairer because higher earners would pay more. And how to pay for all of this? Maybe a windfall tax on the gas producers making big profits as prices soar. Chancellors, both Conservative and Labour, have done it before. That would deter investment in domestic gas sources like the North Sea, says O'Shea. One way or another, the UK's rising energy bill has to be paid.
Ultimately, everybody in the UK is a taxpayer and an energy consumer. So the cost of this is going to have to be paid by UK citizens. The question as to whether that's paid through the energy bill or through general taxation is one for government.
The government has promised answers before the new price cap is set in early February. Simon Jack, BBC News.
The government's latest coronavirus figures show another fall in new cases, 129,587 new infections in the latest 24-hour period. So 148,357 new cases on average per day in the last week. 19,735 people are in hospital with COVID, a slight fall since yesterday, and the number on ventilators has also fallen to its lowest since the middle of October, just under 800. But deaths have risen again. Another 398 were reported of people who died within 28 days of a positive test. That's the highest for almost a year. On average, in the past week, there were 246 deaths per day. On vaccinations, almost 36 million people have had a booster jab. That's more than 62.5% of those aged 12 and over. The High Court has ruled that the government's use of a so-called VIP lane to award contracts for PPE, personal protective equipment, to 2 companies during the first wave of the pandemic was unlawful. The Department of Health agreed deals worth almost £600 million with a firm supplying pest control equipment and a hedge fund. Our special correspondent Lucy Manning is with me now. What more can you tell us about this then?
Well, it's about the way the government spent taxpayers' money on protective equipment for staff in hospitals. And for more than a year, we've reported on gowns and masks that can't be used in the NHS. This particular case was, as you said, about the VIP lane. What it meant was that during the height of the pandemic, if you were a company and you had any contacts with ministers, with MPs, with civil servants, you could go on the VIP list, and it meant your bid would get considered earlier, it would get looked at a bit earlier than other firms. 2 campaign groups complained that this was unfair. The judge agreed and said the VIP lane was unlawful. Ianda and Pesfix were put on it. They got deals of hundreds of millions of pounds, and the judge found that they were given preferential treatment by being on that VIP lane. Bit of a caveat, as always with court cases, the judge also found that they didn't get the contracts because they were on the VIP lane. It was likely they would have got those contracts anyway. So both sides claiming success with this case, but not a good look for the government that their scheme has been found to be unlawful.
Lucy Manning, thank you. French police have arrested a suspect in connection with the unsolved murder of a British family and a French cyclist in the Alps in 2012. Saad al-Hili, his wife Iqbal, her mother Souhaila al-Alef and cyclist Sylvain Mollier were found shot dead on a road near Lake Annecy. The family's 2 young daughters survived the attack. Novak Djokovic says he made an error in judgment after admitting he broke COVID rules in Serbia last month by attending an interview when he knew he had tested positive. The world tennis #1, who is preparing for the Australian Open in Melbourne, has also blamed his agent for wrongly filling out his entry forms to Australia, not declaring he'd travelled there via Spain. The Australian government is still deciding whether to cancel his visa. Back now to our main story, and the Prime Minister has apologised for attending a party in the Downing Street garden at the height of the first lockdown in May 2020. Our political correspondent Alex Forsyth has been to the West Midlands to find out how voters are feeling after Boris Johnson admitted he had joined Number 10 staff for the drinks.
Mr. Speaker, I want to apologise.
Prime Minister's Questions isn't usually a blockbuster event at this boutique cafe on the outskirts of Wolverhampton, but today some staff did stop to watch.
Silly Boris.
All Conservative supporters, they were keen to hear what the Prime Minister had to say, but for Millie, it didn't cut it.
I'm angry. I think he's broke the rules. Everyone who's broke the rules in government have resigned, and I do think it's time he needs to resign, personally. I think he's broke the rules, and I think that's what he's got to do.
Her colleagues, though, think he deserves another chance, though they are frustrated.
Kind of could almost excuse the Christmas event, but this, like 40 people in a garden, no, that's not a work meeting or event. I'm angry with him because it's sad because I really liked him. I thought he was doing a good job.
I'm not angry about what's happened. I'm disappointed that they've had to admit to this. I think all the goodwill that built up is beginning to fade away. I'm still a big supporter, but I think the mood of the country is turning against them.
Just over 2 years ago, this part of Wolverhampton turned to the Conservatives from Labour as Boris Johnson toppled seats across the Midlands and north of England. Now some Tories worry what this politically toxic issue will cost. Some people who voted Conservative for the first time at the last general election say it was the fact Boris Johnson wasn't like other politicians. He didn't play by the same rules as others that was part of his appeal. Now it's that same sense that for some is causing such anger.
Can't stand him. I mean,
how much longer can he go on saying sorry? So many times.
He isn't really sorry, is he?
He wanted to say thank you for all the hard work that was done, and I understand that. But in the light of what was going on in everybody else's home, I mean, you know, there's a lot of people that I would have liked to have said thank you to, but we weren't allowed to gather.
Outside the city centre, retailer Mark says he was well supported by the government during the pandemic, but now he's frustrated that while his business was locked up, others were meeting up.
I do feel quite angry about it, really, the way that we've kind of been almost mistreated in a way and kind of, you know, disregarded a little bit, really. You know, I think a lot of local small businesses are very hard working, so it's almost like a kick in the teeth a little bit, really.
Winning in places like this is the reason Boris Johnson's been popular within his party. Be in no doubt, if the voters turn away, that support will soon fade too. Alex Forsyth, BBC News, Wolverhampton.
Time now for a look at the weather. Louise Lear is here with a beautiful blue sky. It was wonderful for a lot of people today, wasn't it?
Shall we just pause and breathe that in? Absolutely glorious. We haven't seen sunshine, or a lot of it anyway, so far this year. So it was a glorious day for most of us, not for all. This was Wrexham. The best of the sunshine today has been across England and Wales. At the best of the temperatures, they've been reserved for eastern Scotland. Why? Well, because we've got high pressure that's centred across England and Wales at the moment. This little patch of cloud here, that's fog, and some of that was slow to lift away. And toppling across the high, we've got a southwesterly wind, and that's just driving in a little bit more moisture, a little bit of drizzle as well across the far north and west of Scotland. But most of us, it was glorious. That means that through the night tonight, we keep some of those clear skies, and the temperature's really going to fall away quite sharply, and fog is going to form once again across England and Wales. So temperatures for England and Wales maybe down as low as -3. It stays very mild indeed into the far north, but we could have a problem not only for tomorrow tomorrow morning, but into Friday morning as well with some fog. And if you get it, some of it could be dense in places and some of it could take its time to lift, may well just lift into low cloud, and that could impact the temperatures. So it could be a foggy start, but that said, it's also going to be a frosty one with some lovely sunshine for England and Wales. The cloud continues to feed in across the far northwest of Scotland, sheltered eastern areas of Scotland, Aberdeenshire, down into Perth, seeing some sunshine as well. A bit more of a breeze into the far north and west, but elsewhere, very light winds, and that's half of the problem. It means it's not stirring that fog up, unfortunately. So top temperatures once again across England and Wales, about 6 to 8 degrees, maybe only 1 or 2 if you keep the fog all day, much milder once again further north. Now the high pressure just starts to release its grip only very slowly as we move through Friday and into the start of the weekend. So that means that we keep a good deal of dry weather around, potentially more fog on Friday and perhaps a little less in the way of sunshine, but certainly dry. And if you've been trying to take the dog for a walk like me, boy, it's been muddy just recently.
It has. Louise, thank you. And that is all from the BBC News at 6. It's goodbye from me on BBC One. We join the BBC's news teams where you are. Goodbye.